My name's Eric Sidoti. I'm the director of the Whitlam Institute, and I also have the pleasure of being the provost of this campus. So it's a bit of a dual role, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here this morning. Some of you, I know, were here last week, which is a very good sign. We'll see if we can find something for you next week. In fact, we'll talk about a couple of things that are coming up before we finish. That's if I remember that. Amy, our communications manager, is here in the front row to keep me honest. I just noticed that on my run sheet here that she's allowed me 15 minutes for this introduction, so prepare yourselves. I'm about to take every second of it, which is a dangerous thing. Before we get underway with this morning's presentation, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. And around here, I think a number of you would be aware of the Darug people, the traditional owners here, and of course their history that goes back many tens of thousands of years. It's a funny thing being in a building that's 200 years old, and we talk about one of the oldest buildings in the country and so forth, and when the elders are here from the Darug elders are here and so forth, it seems strange to be bragging about the age of a building that's infinitesimal in sort of the time scale of their own history. It's also rather strange. We've had a number of senior Chinese delegations come through, in part because of the university connections and in part because of obviously Gough having, the Whitlam government having recognised the People's Republic 40 years ago. And it's similarly strange to be saying, oh, here's our 200-year-old building, I know you've got some that are a couple of thousand years old, but what's that, eh? Amongst friends. But it is an extraordinary place. It is an extraordinary building for its history, for what it says about our country, for what it reminds us about the stories of our past, and extraordinary in having been resurrected, if you like, from what really looked like it was literally going to be the ashes and shards of a crumbled, demolished building. To be here today is a tribute to a number of people, a great number of people, not least of which is our former Vice-Chancellor, Professor Janice Reid, who refused those who said that it would be which it would have been, much easier for the university to raise this building, to demolish it and not have to worry about it. And she resisted every part of the way, and we were very pleased that we opened, I think we mentioned last week, but we opened on the 24th of September last year, after the final restoration, which was 200 years to the day, that Governor Macquarie laid that elusive foundation stone with its treasures that have remained unfound. But that happened to be just a couple of months before Jan finished her term as Vice-Chancellor after 14 years. So there's a lot of symmetry, there's a lot of history, and there's a very, very interesting backstory, I think, into the way this building came to be what it is. Decisions along the way, struggles, differences. I don't know if we're going to get the unexpurgated version today, Megan, which would be kind of interesting, because I know Alex is here from Capital Works, so we could have right of reply a bit later on. In all of this, we are extremely fortunate to have Megan Jones with us here today. Megan's from TKD, Tanners, Kibble, Denton Architects, and has been involved right from the earliest conception of this restoration back in the late 90s, about 98 I think, through to this final stage. And if you look at some of the credits and the work that Megan's done over that time, because she leads the heritage group out at TKD. She's been involved as a project architect for St Patrick's College at Manly, with the old seminary. I don't know if any of you have been out there, presumably not studying, too many of you, but the old seminary, and became a international hotel school. It's an extraordinary site actually on that Manly headland. The Sydney Electric Lighting Station at Piermont, the Drill Master's House, which is just behind us here, and the Vernon buildings on this campus, as well as a number of other projects. I know she's been doing a major project up in Brisbane over the last couple of years. And it has a particular interest in the Macquarie Greenway buildings, and hence her particular interest in this particular building. So enough from me. Please welcome Megan Jones.
Thank you, Eric, for that introduction. I will not be giving an unexpurgated version, partly because I've forgotten some of the stuff, which is probably good, really. So my talk is going to be really about the approach that we took to the conservation of the project, and that's informed by its history. So there may be some overlaps with Carol's talk from last week, and I'm not going to apologise for that because our history does inform the decisions that we make today. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to assist the University of Western Sydney in the rehabilitation of this significant colonial building. And I use the word rehabilitation purposely because it's the correct term to describe the process of bringing back an abused and neglected building, to bring it back to life and bring it back to a state that it can hold its head high and make a contribution once more. And also so that its significance can be appreciated and investigated by anybody who visits the building. The project was delivered in 4 stages, and there was conservation work as well as adaptation to fit the building for its new use. We've already talked about the fact that it's the oldest 3-storey brick building in Australia, and yes, it's 200 years old, and that is amazing for a colony that was of reprobates and rejects to actually build something like this. In 2004, after the first phase was completed, we actually won a UNESCO Heritage Conservation Award. And I'm just going to read out the citation that we received. The result showcases the building's original architectural qualities and its new contemporary amenity. This project displays a sound technical approach in the conservation of existing significant fabric, while the preservation of all phases of the building's history captures in palimpsest its 200-year history of varied uses. The existing fabric and finishes have been carefully repaired, lost elements have been reintroduced in a creative and innovative manner to complement the original architecture, and new services, fittings and fixtures have been sensitively installed for fire and life safety and amenity to suit the new use. So the Female Orphan School started life in 1813 as a proud Palladian edifice conveying Governor and Mrs Macquarie's ideal of refined architecture carefully placed in the landscape for a positive, benevolent and civic purpose. And these first images that we have of the Female Orphan School display that aspiration. It's a romantic presentation. The building was actually modelled on Mrs Macquarie's own home, and its purpose was to provide a safe place and an educational place for the most vulnerable members of the Australian society at the time. And to actually model it on your own family home, I think it's an incredible, credit to the Macquaries for their vision. It was also located quite remotely from from anywhere really. But when you think about it, and Carol probably spoke about it last week, it was right across the road from Elizabeth Farm, where MacArthur's empire was being directed. So it started in this form in 1813, and it grew quite quickly. If you look at the dates on that plan, it wasn't long before it was expanded. I mean, if you're looking at 1818, 1829. This is the plan that was sent back to England, which was a record of what was built. I don't know why people can't just actually draw what was built, because even Lysart got it wrong, because he had 3 windows on that in the west wing, and this one has 3 windows. It also shows curved passages. We have found no evidence, physical evidence, of those curved passages. But what it also shows is the paired stair in the centre. So looking at archival records doesn't necessarily mean that you're looking at something that's actually authentic. It might be authentic to its day in terms of somebody who drew it, but it may not actually record what was there. This is just a few other views. Looked like they'd cut down all the trees, didn't it? I'd say every one of these views that you're seeing, that I'm showing you now, are actually on display, copies of them through the building. So the building, I'll just go back to that last view very quickly. Sorry, I'm going to get dizzy. So the building was constructed of sandstock bricks with sandstone string courses, quoins and window sills, timber windows and timber roof and floor structure. It was actually built on unstable ground, and if you look carefully around the outside of the central wing in particular, you'll actually see wonky brickwork. It was slumping as it was being built, but they just kept on going. So we've actually got courses of brickwork that are all over the place, and then the stonework, when it came to fit, was basically carved to fit the wonky brickwork, which is just brilliant, I think. And we couldn't work out why was it slumping. And when we actually got to do the first stage of the work, and the builders dug the lift pit, it just kept on filling up with water. There was a natural spring, and that was why. And probably that was why it was the site chosen, because of its water, fresh water. It also had very shallow footings, very thick walls but shallow footings, and that was another problem, that it really couldn't quite cope with the circumstances. And termites were a problem. So it's actually seen water and termites have had their way. Very little subfloor ventilation, and so the floors were replaced numerous times in its past. And it also was battling rising damp. And then as part of its conversion to then it became the Protestant Orphan School in the 1850s, and here are some photographs of it at that time. There's Mrs. Betts, the matron, when it was a Protestant Orphan School, and you actually see some things that are missing in this photograph that are in the building now, and that's the porch and the hoods on the windows, which were introduced during the psychiatric period. Boys and girls were accommodated here. So it was used as an orphanage from 1813 to the late 1880s. And part of the use as a Protestant orphan school was the construction of another orphan school building across. It's actually the building outside over there, which is a very fine Victorian building. You can hardly even tell it that it is. It's been modified so much. And here are the girls and boys. So in 1888, after however many years that is, 60 something, 50 anyway, 70, 1813, and maths, yeah, 75. After 75 years as an orphanage, and looking after girls that weren't always orphans, and boys that weren't always orphans, but they were taken into care and taught to basically domestic skills. The boys were taught trades so that they could actually fend for themselves, have a role in society. In 1888, the orphanage closed down, and the Rydalmere Psychiatric Hospital was established on this same site, and that's not an uncommon thing for government lands to be changed from one use to another. And it wasn't the first psychiatric hospital that had been built. by this stage we already had the one at Tarban Creek, Gladesville, and we already had the one at Rozelle. But it was decided that we needed another psychiatric hospital, and this building was ready and available. And these plans shows you the additions that were made during that period. And it's also during that period that some alterations were made that were fairly permanent. One of them was the removal of the paired stairs so that the space could be used as a bathroom. And you'll see when you go and have a look at the building afterwards that we've actually kept some of the fittings from that bathroom. All the fireplaces, most of the fireplaces, not that one, were converted to toilets. So this is it. This is the psychiatric hospital just before the major alterations occurred. The porch hadn't been built, but those hoods had been added. This is a psychiatric hospital from the river. And now you've got the porch that was added by Vernon. We actually have the drawing where he puts a cross through the stair. Right, let's just take that out. And this is what it got to. And this is people were still occupying the building when it was in this state, which is a bit of a shock, really, when you think about it. And I guess it was during the psychiatric hospital period that the building was subjected to its greatest, and I'd call it, abuse. Stairs were removed, rooms were broken up, toilets were added everywhere. Even, and I'll show you a photograph of one of those such toilets, on the main building, half a wall was taken out and another wall was built 1 metre further out so they could fit a toilet in for the main building. The whole northern veranda was removed. And whilst the Public Works Department maintained the roof, which was just as well, because if the roof hadn't been maintained, there would have been nothing left. So moisture coming in from above was actually stopped. But then we had vandals taking all the gutters and downpipes and anything that was lead or, and sometimes it wasn't actually the vandals, it was actually the security company that was looking after the site. So the site was actually closed down and the site was vacant for a long time. And I remember driving past on James Roos Drive in the 80s and looking across at this building, wondering what was going on there. The weeds were yay high, it was completely derelict. And I was told at the time, that's the old female orphan school. And I thought at that time, that's a building that I'm going to I'm going to work on that building. And fortunately, the University of Western Sydney took over this site, and part of the deal was that they would restore the female orphan school. They could use all the rest of the site for university educational purposes, but the female orphan school was always going to be for contact between the university and the community. It wasn't meant to be for undergraduate students or anything like that. That was the deal that was made. So we busily got around fixing up the Vernon group for classrooms, and basically the university got rebirthed and reopened in 1997. This building stayed derelict. And it really wasn't until the late 1990s that we got involved. And this is what we saw. And they'd mowed the lawn, which is great. But this is what it had become. So you can see the verandas removed, even the link that linked between that brick stairwell and the Protestant Orphan School had been removed. This is the lean-to that was added on to accommodate a toilet. You can see steel fire stairs that were added in. I don't know, you probably all have seen this at some stage, this building, the way it was. I love that shot. That's the east wing. And just some shots of the interiors. So this is what we were confronted with when we first started measuring up the building and researching it. So this is the front entry hall. The bathroom on the first floor. You see that everything had been painted over with white paint. And those partitions on the right, that's the cubicles. Even cedar joinery had been painted over. This is actually the room, the western room on the first floor. It had all those shoes in it. I don't know what they were doing there. So the building was infested by rats, pigeons, who the rats ate, and also bees. For some reason, we had 2 humongous beehives that, when they were taken down, filled a wheelbarrow. And this is another example of the abuse. We've actually left that wall pretty well as it is, and you'll see it in the stair hall. We were told that the bricks were removed from the Female Orphan School to repair the Hyde Park barracks. That was in the days that Western Sydney was considered to be a poor relative, and even though the Female Orphan School is actually older than the Hyde Park barracks, which is, staggering to think. So we actually established principles, because where do you start on a building like this? Where do you start? What's your guiding principle? How do you work through so that you can make proper decisions, you can respect the building, you can respect the new use that it has to accommodate? So we conserved everything, the existing significant fabric. We didn't try to restore it to its former glory, because what is its former glory? It's had such a mixed use, it's had such a major contributory use too, as an orphanage for both girls and then for boys and girls, and as a psychiatric hospital. They are all significant history. And to actually say, right, we're going to get rid of anything to do with a psychiatric hospital and take it back to where it was and where it was an orphanage, well, firstly, the 2 reasons we wouldn't have done that. 1, that's eradicating history, that's rewriting history. And 2, we didn't know. We don't know what the fireplaces exactly look like. We don't know exactly what the ceilings looked like when it was an orphanage. So we actually thought that, well, what we really want to do is we want this building to be, we want to respect the building, we want to respect its history. So its architectural form was very important. So removing that awful toilet addition was an important thing to do, and restoring those windows so that the original architectural presentation of that central wing could be known. We reconstructed lost elements to try and get the program of the building. So circulation, the way people travel through the building in a regional, I guess, closer to the orphanage phase, which meant reconstructing that paired stair in the front entrance. But we didn't really know what it looked like. We knew its configuration, we knew it was a Georgian period. And so we've actually done a contemporary version of a Georgian period stair. But we've done it in a way that you can actually interpret the space both with the stair and without the stair. So it only touches the walls in 2 places. And new elements, you imagine this building built in 1813, no electricity, no air conditioning, no computer cabling, no sewerage. We had to actually provide all those things. And a 3-storey timber frame building in today's terms is a no-no. I mean, if you wanted to follow the Building Code of Australia, it would have to be concrete. So we had to work with all those issues while still respecting the fabric and and what was left from all those periods. And then we had to actually add in elements that allowed it to take its new life. And we've done that in a way, and you can see, just looking around even in this room, we've tried not to confuse the history. So we've actually tried to put contemporary elements in. We haven't put oldie worldy lights or oldie worldy partitions. We've actually tried to say, okay, this is 21st century, what we're doing, which means that in the future, if somebody wants to come and adapt the building to another phase, they can take out all those contemporary things and add their own contemporary things, or they can leave them. They might think that they're worth it. I'm not going to go through but we actually did follow the Borough Charter. So we wanted to give a clear understanding of the history, of the significance of the place, and properly present all the stages of the building's history. The fabric was very fragile. We had huge problems with rising damp, fretted brickwork, termites had gone to town, and so that just contemporary conservation techniques were used. We revealed the paint schemes from all, and you can actually see paint schemes from all the periods of the life of the building, and particularly in that main entrance hall, you could actually see the string course that accompanied the orphanage phase when the stair was there, and then the string courses and paint schemes from when the stair had been removed. And that's basically right through the building. So what we desalinated the walls, we introduced damp-proof courses, we've controlled the structural subsidence with an apron around the whole of the outside to maintain the moisture content in the soil, and that was guided by Hughes Truman, the structural engineers. We've got one of the structural engineers who worked on the project here with us, which is great. Where we had to take away contemporary brickwork or, early 20th century or mid 20th century brickwork, we actually had to match the bricks to put them back. That was a big effort. We weren't going to go back to Hyde Park Barracks and say, hey, give us back our bricks. But the archaeologists were working down at Parramatta, and they actually found a site, which was actually an archaeological site that was of a very early. It wasn't as early as 1813, but we managed to get enough bricks. We had to cut them down and we had to desalinate them and all that sort of thing. But if you go outside, you'll actually see that brick working in with the existing bricks. There was lead paint everywhere. That had to be removed. There was plaster that was in poor condition, termite damage, rotten timber, and the galvanised steel hoods had to be repaired. I just want to talk to you slightly about quality control. We just didn't go in with a whim, and we actually kept everybody informed. It was a collaborative approach. The client was informed. We worked very hard to make sure that the builder didn't think, oh, a heritage building, I'm going to charge whatever I like. We actually made sure that we had prime cost rates and provisional sums, and they were very carefully monitored. So, in fact, cost control was really important because there's a limit to how much, there was a budget we had to work with, and the last thing you want is for a university to blow all its budget on the first phase and not be able to finish anything else. So we made sure that we had samples and prototypes so that the builder was very clear about what the standard was required, and we actually worked with skilled tradesmen. And the first phase was administered by the architect. I'm not going to talk anymore about that. So I'm just going to show you some photographs of some of the things that we came across. So this is some of the wonky brickwork. This is the window in the central wing on the western side, and there's a pig in the brickwork around the back. And the pig is where you've got 6 courses of bricks and 5 courses of bricks, and somehow they get together, and that's around that side. And you can actually see, and this is a great photograph because you can actually see the way when the stone sill was inserted, it was actually carved to match. That's very, very fascinating. And this is that corner that I talked about being rebuilt, with the coins being put back and the bricks being put back. And this was, you saw the photographs of the whole thing being white. We had no idea really what we were going to find. There were a few signs and boards that once they were removed, we actually saw stencil work. But this sort of thing was an amazing revelation to actually find when that floor was taken away, that there was the stencil work in such good condition. Now that stencil work is more than 100 years old. It took a long time to work through the technique to be used to actually take the overpaint off without damaging the paint below. And that was, we actually did, these trials were done actually before it went out to tender so that we could actually, again, control that. And these are the guys actually painstakingly taking the paint off the walls. So it looks a bit messy, doesn't it? It looks a bit, you know, like unfinished, but that's part of the intent, to help people understand the age, the history of the building. This is the desalination. So basically the basement, so the ground floor was completely saturated, the bricks were completely saturated, and when you have salt in bricks, as it comes out of the surface and evaporates, the crystals are left and they expand and basically smash the face of the brick off. It was very important to desalinate the brickwork. We also added a damp-proof course through the whole building, and so far it's working okay. All the timber lintels had been eaten out by termites. And it's solid brickwork. Some of the walls in this first, particularly in the central wing, the walls are 800 millimetres thick, nearly 3 foot thick. You can't just put steel in that. So fortunately, somebody's actually come up with terracotta lintels filled with concrete, and they actually fitted into the coursing of the bricks. So here's an intervention that we did. We thought, if we go and put timber back, we're going to have the same problem again in the future because they're solid brick walls. So we actually used terracotta, and that's a stable solution. I just want to talk about the technical challenge relating to the fact that it was going to be used again by the public. A 3-storey building with timber floors and a stair interconnecting 3 levels had to be fire engineered, which means that we couldn't actually strictly comply with the Building Code of Australia. We ended up having to have a sprinkler system put through, which would allow that opening. We needed to make sure that people could just enter into the building. There was a step at the porch, and then there was a step from the porch into the front door. The 1880s porch pavement is still there. We put plastic over the top of it, and we built a new porch level so that people could come in on grade, and then the roadway was regraded. And we had to introduce new services. And as I said before, there was no electricity. There wasn't even any gas light. So, and some people have said, "Oh gosh, those conduits are ugly." The alternative was chasing the brickwork, which was already in such dire condition, and repairing plaster, which was already in poor condition. So we actually took that decision that we would expose the conduits. So pragmatic decision, but also philosophically, we're actually showing this building wasn't built with electricity. We've added electricity, and that's how we've added it. And that was a conscious decision. And the new walls, we've tried to include new walls in glass or in contemporary materials. I'm just going to run through that. So what we have now is a building fit for purpose. And can I just say that the new use of this building or its 4th phase, as the Whitlam Institute and the Margaret Whitlam Galleries, is an entirely appropriate use for this building. It meets the requirements that the government made to the university to make it a contact point between the university and the community. The philosophies of Governor Macquarie and Mrs Macquarie are completely aligned with the philosophies of the Prime Minister Gough Whitlam, to look after the vulnerable, to recognise Aborigines, all Aboriginal people, all of those things. They just resonate. So to actually have the building occupied by the Margaret Whitlam Galleries and the Whitlam Institute, and that fits like a hand in a glove, it's just fantastic. So we now have everybody enters in the front door. They're greeted at the information facility. In the West Wing is the Margaret Whitlam Galleries, and places where conferences can be held. And in the East Wing is the Whitlam Institute, which showcases physical and philosophical contribution. There still needs to be offices and all those other things that make a institution work. We've actually drawn this correctly. See, there's only a pair of windows in the West Wing, not 3. Anyway. So here we have this beautiful building taking its place again. On that left is the wall that we had to rebuild in the new brickwork. You'll see all this yourself, but I just thought I'd just run you through some of those shots. The decision to actually put a glazed link was one that we actually discussed at length with the Heritage Council of New South Wales. A very ordinary roof had been put on in the 50s, corrugated iron. I think there might be some photographs of that around. And that was taken off in the first phase. And it was very important for us to provide undercover and accessible access through the whole building. And the floors in this wing and in the eastern wing are actually different levels to the floors in the central wing. And so this ramp gave us the ability, or these linking pieces gave us the ability to introduce ramp, but also cover. But we've done it in a way that's quite refined and not. It's not meant to be look at me. You know, it's meant to be a calm way of adding cover, weather protection. You can actually see in this photograph, and you will actually see it in the main when you go there yourself, the 3 colour schemes that are all laid over each other. When my children came here the first time, they said, "Oh, it's like Pompeii, really, isn't it?" They're very privileged children. They've actually seen Pompeii. But I guess it's our version of Pompeii. We've revealed this thing. And this is the bathrooms, or what's left of the bathrooms. This colour scheme in this room, I've had meetings in this room. This is the original colour scheme. There was no other colour scheme before this. So that's quite exciting to actually see the colours that the orphan school had in one of the lesser rooms. This is the room we're in now, before the furniture was put in. I might just explain about the Rydalmere ceilings. Rydalmere was introduced in the orphanage, in the psychiatric hospital period. We don't really know what the ceilings were in the orphanage period. They'd all gone by the time we arrived. And we actually decided to continue with those. In many cases, they've been lowered about 50 millimetres, 2 inches, to accommodate sprinkler pipes and strengthening of beams and that sort of thing. But we've kept the colour, the grey colour, throughout the building. I like this photograph. One of our greatest Governor-Generals giving it the thumbs up. I thought it was completely appropriate and it was well done that the Governor-General opened the building that the Governor had established. And in fact, when the first phase was opened, it was opened by Marie Bashir, which was also appropriate. And the last shot I've got is of Julia Gillard singing. So it's been a real privilege, as I said, and such an honour to work on this building. It's my building, so, you know. I know I've had to tussle with Eric for ownership, but it was difficult at times to convince people to take a particular approach. I remember when the Heritage Council came to see the first wing, the first stage when it was opened, they thought, this is strange. Why have you left the paint like that? And it's fun. It's interesting now. Everybody does it. So it's so yes, challenges with authorities, challenges with the contractors at times. I remember throwing my hard hat on the ground on numerous occasions when people were doing the wrong thing. But I guess that's a great thing about being an architect who works with old buildings. You get to follow your passions, and everybody learns. We learned a lot. Anyway, that's it really. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Megan. I think you're left in no doubt at all that this is a labour of love, this building. It was a great moment, I have to say, about 6 months ago when the last day that the subbies and the contractors were all on site, and we had a barbecue out the back here. And we were able to say to them that they'd been involved in something where their children's children will be able to come back and remember that they brought this back to life. And Megan's passion, I think, is evident in what she said. And it was communicated, I think, right through the capital works people from the university that were involved, the subbies that were involved, the tradesmen that came in. And you saw, we lived on site. My staff and I actually occupied the central wing there right through the final stage of construction for the best part of a year, which had its challenges in it as well. But it was extraordinary to actually see people come to life around the project in so many different ways. And it's a wonderful thing in this day and age, I have to say, to see people who leave a project like that with such a sense of pride and ownership. I think this notion that competing ownership is very true, though we like to think actually that we are the custodians of this great place. It is very much a people's place, and that's what we want it to be. So, Megan, thank you very much for that. You're open to a few questions, hey? Okay, so if you've got any questions, fire away. Yes, please.
I was just walking along under the railway bridge last week, and I noticed the old bridge abutments to the railway bridge, and they complement similar in form and materials to the portico. And I wondered, did the two come together? Is that just a coincidence? Or?
This one down here, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know, I'll have to go and have a look. Sorry.
The first thing I noticed was it's terracotta brick and sandstone.
Okay.
And I walked up the hill and I saw the portico, but that's an add-on, so you don't know.
If you are going to walk down there, one thing that is amazing is that where the bike path goes down by the river, that's actually the carriage pathway that the Macquaries used to come up to the... So that's incredible. That road, is still there. It's been, fixed up a bit, but yeah.
The floorboards in one of the rooms I was in were laid diagonally. Was that because they were originally laid diagonally, or was that because of making it stronger?
Both. They were. There are 2 layers of boards. We left them as they were there, and they were laid diagonally. I think to make it a stronger and less, sort of wobbly. Yes, you're right. But these aren't the 1830 floorboards, 1813 floorboards. They are the, 1920, I think, because the termite activity.
You talked about the 4 stages that you were to
Yeah, yes. Okay. So, yeah, so the first stage was the central wing. So first of all, we put a DA in for the whole thing, which was very handy. And we told Parramatta Council that we would deliver it in 4 stages, so that we didn't have to keep on going back with DAs. So the first stage was the central wing and its immediate landscape presentation. The second stage was the roofs and the facades of the rest of the complex. So that was fixing up the windows, the roofs, fixing up the downpipes, so that the place was secure and weatherproof. The third phase was the west wing, which was the galleries and conference facilities, and the fourth phase was the one that was finished to finally complete the work, which was the east wing for the Whitlam Institute, galleries and library, and the landscape works for the setting. That was the fourth phase.
Right, so the internal, fixing up the internal, was that one of those phases, or as you went through?
As we went through. So the first phase was inside and outside of the central wing.
Oh, right, okay.
Then we did the outside of the rest of it, and then we did the insides of the west wing, and then the insides of the east wing, and then the landscaping.
I'll take down the back, then we'll come up the front.
It's
Yes.
you.
I was just wondering, is it known why they only decided to put 2 windows on one side instead of 3?
No.
Thank you.
I was told, actually, I don't know who told me this, but they sort of admired it as this very pragmatic Australian approach that we only needed 2 this side, so we'll only have 2. But no, really clean. Up here,
I was
please.
wondering about spring. You've mentioned having revealed that a spring existed. Water has a way of coming back to its natural course sometimes. And I just wondered what...
It's what we did. So what we've actually done is there's a lift pit, and then there's another pit.
Right.
And basically, if water gets into the lift pit, it drains into this other pit, which then has a submersible pump, and that. But it's sort of in the water table. That's the problem. It's not like a well or a cistern or something like that. It's actually, it's just the water table is very close to the surface. So you could have, I guess we could have put down a bore and basically taken that water up. But we've done it the other way. We've actually we've got a secondary pit with a submersible pump, and that keeps that going. Yeah, and one of the reasons that we've done, we've got verandas. Well, we put back the verandas, but we actually put them on a concrete apron, and then the stone is on top. And then at the front, we've actually got membrane on the ground, and then gravel on top, so that actually keeps all the moisture stable all around. So you're not having evaporation in different places, and then you get a different moisture content in different parts of the building. Yeah.
Max, please.
How do you desalinate bricks and remove lead paint?
Okay. The desalination, they use, it's a magic material, and it's called cocoon, and it's in like filter paper, like you use in chemistry, filtering stuff, and it's a poultice, and it's applied to the wall, and it basically draws it out, and then it's taken away, and then you put another poultice back, and it draws it away. And then you basically are testing. There are gauges that you can actually test the moisture content. What was the other one? Lead paint. Lead paint is it's again a poultice, and we didn't use your Bunnings paint remover. We actually use various different strengths. There's a company called Westox. Am I allowed to advertise?
Yeah.
Maybe. There's a company called Westox.
We'll charge them later.
And the proprietor of that company, he actually has done a lot of innovation and research and design. And in fact, some of his poultices and that he's actually developed have been used in Italy, in Venice, in repairing of plasterwork. So we actually use that technology. So again, a poultice is applied, and how long it's left on the paint determined I guess, the number of layers. But we ended up having to do testing to see how many layers they were, and also tested how much of it was lead paint. So the original paint wasn't lead. It's really only from the 1880s and onwards that there was lead. But it's another poultice system. So
I think we have one down the back, then we'll come to the front.
Do we know why the canopies on the windows were added during the psychiatric period? Was it stylistically?
I don't know. It's certainly those same hoods are at every psychiatric hospital that was built, or was. So I'm not probably fashion, and we've also got rails to stop the residents from escaping. And I don't know whether you'll get to see it, but in the offices in the east wing, there's actually the original windows were removed and new windows were put back, and they were purposely designed so that they actually pivot, and then there's a brass bar or a steel bar, in between. So they actually you can get virtually 100% ventilation, but nobody can get in or out. And so the windows, there's very few original windows left in the building. But that was, I think there's one in your office.
There is.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's right. Part of the criterion.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Sorry, so was there
There was somebody
on
in the
side?
front,
And there's
yeah.
just at the front here, yeah. Come back.
Work on the colour scheme on the external side, because I know there's this building and another one up there's got a different colour scheme.
Pretty well the external colour scheme of the whole of the orphan school is the same,
Yes.
but
The
there
one
might be
behind
another
there?
building somewhere else.
Might be thinking about just behind the
Oh, that's right, yes.
yes, the schoolhouse.
Yeah, so that's the old orphan. That was a building purposely built for the orphan school. So basically, the colour scheme was set by the colours that we found externally. Unfortunately, when the veranda was removed, that central wing got cement render added to it. You can actually see that brown. It was originally faced brickwork, but it was such a hard render. We actually thought, if we're going to take that off, it's going to just do so much damage to the brickwork. So we actually left it. And obviously, the other wings still have their face brickwork, but the green, that sort of the grey green and the pale colours, they were the colours that we.
Is the colour readily available, or do you have to mix your own?
We matched it to the nearest paint that was available.
Right.
We did do special mixing for where we were infilling in some of the other rooms, but externally we were very conscious of the performance of the paint. And we didn't want to sort of start mucking around with that. Yeah.
I'll take one this side, then I'll come back to it. Please.
Speaking of brickwork, I noticed that the rules stretches from headers to a lot of it. Did you come across any brickwork that was maybe at first
No. I didn't actually study that, I'm sorry. But it is very well bonded. And that was the shame of the bricks being taken for the Hyde Park Barracks, because they would have only got 1 in 3 bricks, full bricks, when they, because of the way the headers and stretchers were, yeah.
Yep.
You mentioned at the first stage the architect tender was the project manager, right? So is that because of the DA basically? That's what you were saying before.
No, it was just. I think. So we administered the contract to the point of issuing site instructions and all that sort of thing in the first phase, partly because Capital Works didn't have enough project managers to do it, and then when the next phases came along, they actually had people who could who administered the contract themselves. Yeah.
There might be a specific reason why you did it that way, besides not having the staff.
Yep. Please.
I think it's a terrific project, and a lot of us are very jealous because we get to get other buildings that we would like to see this process. Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned it was part of the deal in terms of the university when it came onto the site, that this building would be rehabbed, and just kind of obviously the cost that would go along with something like this, and And where was the will in terms of which of the government entities would have had the will to do something like this, and then, you know, through the years to keep up that will, especially with all the cuttings that were looking down the barrel at it.
So it was Department of Health, and I guess of all the departments, health seems to have a huge amount of property, and obviously, and also very early properties. If you think about out at North Parramatta, the number of, you know, the extent of ownership of Department of Health. But in fact, the site's now owned by another entity, not health, water and something, isn't it?
Which one's that?
Who actually owns the site
I'm
still?
not
You
sure.
know,
Do you know?
I'm not sure. Alex, do you know who owns the site now? Anyway, it's whoever.
The land.
Yeah, the land.
I thought it was transferred, but
Yeah.
maybe not.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure how you get a government to commit to doing things, and I can actually completely see both sides of the story, particularly for the Department of Health when people are crying out for neonatal and cancer treatment hospitals and all that sort of thing to actually, and there's a limited pot of money. I think it's really hard for competing interests when. So I mean, it's fantastic that the university actually got this site, and in fact, it seems to be universities that, if you think of Kirkbride at Rozelle Hospital, that's occupied by the Sydney College of the Arts, which is the University of Sydney, and that's an example of another site that's fortunately still being looked after. So it does seem to need it needs a guaranteed use, and a use that will generate interest and then also, I guess, generate maintenance budgets. But when a building's got there's no purpose for it, it's very hard for anybody to think about just putting money into it. So that's why I guess I say from a practical point of view, it's great that this building has a new use but it's even more wonderful that it's a use that's got such synergy with its original purpose. But a building won't be looked after unless it has a use, and there's a finite number of museums that you can have, I think, without, you know, just museums like house museums. We're not like England with the stately homes, you know, program. We just don't have the population or the money. And we don't have a lottery either, which they do in England, a lottery that pays for conservation work.
Did I hear you say that it was part of the deal? So
It was, yeah.
So was the use identified at that time?
No, it just. This is what my understanding is. Basically, the university was essentially given the site by the state government on the condition that they would then restore and adapt the buildings for their use, provided that this building didn't just become one of the other buildings that, you know, for university use, but would continue to have a community use, or a community outreach use. And none of this work could have happened without grants from both the state government and the federal government. And the last phase was done under a federal government grant, and the first phase was done under a $1 million grant from the Heritage Council, which was the biggest grant they'd ever given. So it is sort of, I guess, a combined effort, commitment, but also finding proper use.
I mean, if I could add a little bit
Yeah.
to that, it seems to me that you're absolutely right in the terms of the trick is, in part, to ensure that the adaptive reuses with whether it's an institution or something else that actually has the capacity to maintain it and ensure that it is a living space, because this would not work in any other way. It would not work. In terms of how you garner support for particular projects, you know, I have to say I think it's my experience, because I wasn't here for the first stages, but was very involved in the advocacy for the third stage and the funding. I have to say it's totally arbitrary. Really, it's not like a list of priorities that are then worked through and so forth. So there was a bit of luck involved, a lot of heavy lifting to get across the line, very strong application, etc. And so there are a lot of elements to it that it's not science. It is much more about other things and a string of other things. And part of, I think, getting across that final line was, in fact, when we put the vision statement together for all of that, it was very much about the university unequivocally saying that this is a public space, a democratic space, which has been returned to the people, and it was not a space and would never be a space that would be locked away. And I think that was really critical to getting across the line. The second thing in this last phase, because the funding basically went, I think, $1 million for phase one from a grant and about $1.5 million from the university, if I remember rightly.
I think it was, yeah.
Phase two was roughly the same in terms of that, but phase three was a $7 million grant from the federal government with university, further university top up over that as well. So it was a long undertaking from basically 13 years, over 13 years. Any other questions? No? Please, you can linger. I'm sure Megan's... Are you running away? Sure.
Not immediately.
Yeah.
In about half an hour.
I'm sure she's
yes.
happy to have a chat. I think there's still coffee and tea, and Vicky's out the back there, so don't race away. And of course, take as long as you like to linger through the building. The galleries are all opened, so enjoy yourselves. There's food, as those of you who have been here before. It's the Bakehouse Cafe, where you get very good coffee, and the others are open.